Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Price List Update Summary video series brought to you by Actionable Insights. You've got Harrison here, you've got Whatley there, and you've got Stone there. And we're here to talk about the changes to the Xactimate price list in June 2024. What's going on, gentlemen? How are you today? No time for questions because we've got enough to talk about and not enough time to record. So let's jump right into it. This is what the industry wants anyways, right? They want us to be quick.
They don't really care how
so
we're
jump to it.
Beautiful. Okay. Let's check out the new line items.
New line items.
There are 7 new line items this month that were added to the Xactimate price list. The first line item here is in the tile category, TIL SWRLM for a waterproof membrane liquid. Now, Stone, in prepping for this call, you and I were talking about building methodologies, and This seems to be something that's a little newer in the industry. So give us a little info on waterproof membrane and this liquid application.
Absolutely. This line item fills in a gap. A couple of months ago, we got our foam backer board line items, more reflective of modern building construction methodology where you're using prefabricated panels and pans. This is now the liquid version of the membrane where you're actually using that to create your waterproofing membrane before you do the tile work. So now we have line items to reflect multiple ways to do waterproofing for tile and tub surrounds, which is reflective of what we see in the industry and from construction through the decades.
Yeah, because we're in Southern California, you're in Indiana. There are big differences in building methodology. So now there are line items that reflect how things are built differently in different places. Wonderful. There are 3 new insulation line items, FWD, around window and door foam insulation, various sizes, 3 to 11 square feet, 12 to 23 square feet, 24 to 40 square feet. Whatley, talk to me about these new window and door foam insulations. We've had line items for activities like this. What are these here to specifically address?
Yeah, so this is for what we know to be great stuff. That would be the brand name of the yellow spray foam that we commonly use. These line items would more accurately be applied in a new construction environment, or what we call colloquially a scraper, when something is scraped down the slab and you build back up. Because if you are replacing the windows or doors, it typically be more accurate and advisable to include the retrofit line item, and that retrofit line item already includes the spray foam. And so I see here a overage rule emerging within the actionable profile, Stone, such that if you've included this window and door foam insulation and you've included the retrofit line item, that would likely be an overage. So use these line items, guys, when you're not using the retrofit line items.
Well said. Lastly, there are 3 new fee line items this month. Fee, e-lodge, e-meal, and e-mob. These are for lodging expenses, meal/food expenses, and mobilization expenses. These are all bid items, and we've seen a lot of these fee line items in the last 5 years that are added as a bid item. And primarily, these are intended to be used in a catastrophic event and large mobilizations, and there need to be concessions made for lodging and meals and foods and things like that. There are no prices associated with this, so it's always up to the parties involved to determine if it's warranted and what the costs would be, et cetera. So the number one thing we saw in March 2021, I believe, the introduction of the geospatial scan and digital sketch asset line items, Fee Scan 3D and Fee Sketch. These fall into that category of, hey, these are things that come up on claims, and when there is no line item for it, it makes it hard to settle the claim right away. So they now exist as line items. So if you need to discuss lodging, meals, or mobilization in a large job or a catastrophic event, you have the opportunity to discuss those. All right, that's the 7 new line items this month. Let's take a look and check out the changes.
Checking out the changes.
I'm going to do that sexy thing I do where I snap windows on the screen that you're looking at. So fun. Okay, on the left-hand side, if this is your first time watching this section, we have the May 2024 price list, what used to be. On the right side, we have the June 2024 price list of the new line, the changes to existing line items. Let's start here. We start with yield changes, supporting event changes, things that potentially impact the price. And one of the first changes here is to the CPS LAB and LABA line items, the labor and after-hour labor line items. Now, you'll notice here if I scroll on the top side, we're in my favorite place in Xactimate, the unit price tab of a line item. And you'll see in May, the labor trade code for these particular labor line items was LBR general labor. And now in June, it is now CLN. And when we were looking at the majority of the CPS line items, a lot of them, almost all of them already use CLN. And these labor line items were I think the only two in the CPS category that were using the LBR trade code. So Whatley, talk to me here on the thoughts behind updating to LBR to CLN for these two line items.
So those that know how to dive deeply into a line item, and maybe you can pull up the bric-a-brac line item.
Sure.
As I talk through it. But the majority of the line items within the CPS category that include labor and materials, they actually include two classes of labor. They include CLN, general cleaning, non-skilled labor cleaning. What Harrison, you and I have described as molly maids traditionally, but there are some varying thoughts about whether that class of in categorization is accurate versus the cleaning and supervisory. So what do you have there? CLN-S. So we know that the cleaning and supervisory really to be like a water tech supervisor. So those are included in the line item. Now, what have we had for like maybe 20 years ago that CPS LAB was tied to CLN trade code? But then at some point, maybe 15 years ago, this is all approximate, guys. I don't know. I don't recall exactly when it happened, but this line item was moved towards the general labor because it was understood that the folks doing contents work were somewhere in between like a non-skilled cleaner and a water tech. And so LBR was more accurate. But what's happened is the CLN category cleaning. This is, guys, what is the trade code that fires, like if you're cleaning walls, right, with a Kim sponge and so on after fire. So it's a big part of how we bill in this industry. But the CLN category has ratcheted up to recognize the outsized amount of inflation and inflation even as it relates to labor. And so now
the labor rate for CLN
and LBR are very close. And so Harrison and we did some analysis across the 432 published price list, and we were able to determine 432 regions. The delta with this move from LBR to CLN, for some of you guys, it's going to be good in your region. Some of you guys are going to be bad, but it's not going to be much of a change. In aggregate, it's 2.2% positive and bends towards the restore ever so slightly. But just depends on your region, because in some areas CLN is more than LBR. In some areas it is less. So have a look with your teams and see how that impacted your particular region. It's going to be either, on average, it's either up, $3.42, or it's down $2.93. But you can just see that $2 shift on the plus and minus depending on your region.
And this is the best time to remind everybody, give pricing feedback. Like, this is the best way to impact your local pricing, is to reach out to pricing@xactware.com or pricing@verisk.com. Both of those email addresses work. And to provide local data points on, hey, what are the wages and material costs and things in our area? So yes, thank you, Whatley, for that rundown. Naturally, when we were looking at this change, it was interesting to recognize, hey, a lot of the CPS line items already use CLN, so it made sense to just update LBR to CLN now that the cost structures are more similar than they used to be for who's doing that work.
Can you pull up the I there for under the replace cost CPS LAB?
Yeah.
And so if you were to advocate with the pricing department, what are the kind of things you're looking at? Well, you're looking at what the worker's wage is. So am I paying my individual contents tech $20.50? Is that labor burden of $12 adequate? Is that labor overhead of $29? Does that reconcile with my business? And if you see anything that overtly doesn't reconcile with your business or the class of technicians that are required to do great work, then you should advocate accordingly. And although I wish there was a better mechanism, or maybe more institutional, more modern, it's still pricing at Xactware.com is your best bet. They are great about replying in a thoughtful way. And now, as Harrison mentioned, is a good time to advocate on your behalf if you're a contents professional, because this change, whenever changes are made like this, the pricing department is more open to making warranted adjustments based on feedback in large quantities.
Well said. All right, let's jump to the next changes in our yield and supporting event adjustment section. It's around the HVC ductwork, hot or cold air, 10-inch round, 7-inch round, or 8-inch round. Essentially, there was a small component update. What they noticed is that one of the components in these line items was not the proper size. They used to have 7-inch round air ducts with 6-inch galvanized takeoff ductwork. They've simply updated the components to reflect the proper size for the galvanized takeoff ductwork for that particular line item. So small changes there to make sure we have the proper components in the right line items. Jumping down to our additional item information changes. Woof, you're going to see, I believe, 12 line items here. These are the HEPA vacuuming line items. Now, let me be clear. I did not include all 60 HEPA vacuuming line items that are affected here, but I did include the primary 3 from each applicable category. So for the HEPA vacuuming line items in CLN, HMR, TCR, and WTR, there's been a change to the description of the line item, specifically in the quality field. It used to say medium-sized backpack, canister, or upright type HEPA vacuums. Now it specifies or upright vacuum with a HEPA filter. And Whatley, you and I were talking previously of, we believe this clarification is just to make it clear that the vacuum that is being used should have a dedicated slot for an air filter if it is being used for HEPA vacuuming and you are charging for air filters and other things.
Yeah, it's just a distinction between a pre-filter or non-pre-filter. On the left, you could have a filter that's trying to do everything that's also claims to be HEPA, but that isn't the spirit of why you would have some of the HEPA charged line items, the HEPA filter itself, and then they just applied that distinction broadly throughout the whole price list. But there's really not a whole lot here to sink your teeth into. If you're watching us talk and you can't really figure out how this impacts your day-to-day claim settlement, it's because it doesn't.
There it is. All right. Next, there are 4 line items in the masonry category around the blocks, various sizes, in place. Now, these particular line items, there was a clarification in the note field. You'll note previously there was nothing in the note field, and now there is a very large sentence in the note field. So let's read through this and just comment on it briefly. Note for these masonry block line items. Generally, a contractor will have and use standard scaffolding sections, ladders, jacks, and plank scaffolding as part of their normal equipment tool set. And as such, the labor yield assumption addresses the average time necessary for normal 1 or 2 story applications, including the setup and use of this equipment as needed, where the ladder scaffold platform does not exceed 20 feet. If additional labor is required, use item MAS LAB. And so I thought this was interesting because there's lots of conversations in the industry about tools of the trade, cost of doing business, things like that. But most importantly, Whatley, what we talk about in our training is yields, productivity. And was this line item built for how I am using it? Is the assumed production of this labor trade accurate for how I intend to use this line item? And you and I have used, I'm installing carpet on a spiral staircase as an example for years of, hey, the carpet line item was not designed for a spiral staircase, and we might need to adjust the yield to reflect that is harder to do than the line item intended. To me, this change reflects, hey, they're just trying to clarify the line item productivity assumes that this is a part of their this is in their tool set, and that they will be working up to a feet of 20 height as part of this activity as normal. So it's just clarifying how the yields are intended to be addressed. Any thoughts, questions, or concerns on this particular change?
I don't see it about the yield. I just think it precludes the restore from charging for ladder jacks and scaffolding to augment their masonry activities unless they're working at fantastic height, greater than 20 feet, which does not happen very often in a restoration environment. So
fair. Obviously, the first part of that says, hey, this stuff is standard and in the tool set. But my goal was to highlight this doesn't happen all that often, where they specify here the labor yield assumptions addresses the average time necessary for normal 1 or 2 story applications. They are saying that is how the line item was built, and we want to be clear as to if anybody's in there going, oh, well, I don't know if this was built for me to work at height, and I'm now going to adjust a bunch of yields and complicate things. It's just clarifying what is included in the line item, which is generally
Now
what
you
we
know.
appreciate.
Yeah, I think what they're really saying with that, what you've highlighted there, is that we have queried a lot of masonry contractors. This is like the subs that a prime would hire, and this is the unit-based price that we got. And those subcontractors don't typically break out things at the same level that a restorer would. And so the price that built up these particular masonry activities already include scaffolding and ladders and so on. So that's what they're trying to say. But I don't really think they can say that in the additional item information.
Fair. I actually think you probably worded that as best as it could be, of just, hey, we're trying to clarify of how this stuff is put together and priced out, et cetera, and what's included in the line item. All right, our last change. Guys, 51, a lot of changes this month. TIL SWRPM. This is the waterproof membrane tile underlayment line item. We've had this line item for a while. You may have used it many times before. What has changed is specifically the line item description now has the word poly for polyurethane in it. Now we have a liquid underlayment line item, so they had to change the existing one to clarify this one's for poly and the new one is for liquid. That's it, gentlemen. That's the changes to the existing line items. We have one more section. Let's look forward to the future.
Forward to the future.
I'm going to open up right here. Every month, the pricing department gives us a little preview of what new line items may be coming on the road ahead. We saw these two last month, but they are here again. There might be new line items for interior Dutch doors in the near future, as well as new items for precast landscape stair blocks. So still looking forward to those, but this was a lot of changes this month. 7 new line items and a bunch of changes to existing line items. Thank you. Thank you for watching, supporting, liking, sharing on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. No, we're still not on TikTok. Thank you for asking. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at support@getinsights.org. And be sure to pay attention to all the things that we're doing around Xactimate and Xactimate line items, like the Actionable Profile, a profile on Xactimate that provides live estimating guidance while you work, trying to help you not make many mistakes and make sure you include all the line items you should be including when you submit an estimate. So thank you, and good luck settling those claims out there.
Keep building.
Keep learning and growing.